Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Kovacs here. Mishnah Yomi has just finished chapter 3 of Bava Batra, Chezkat Batim, about Chazaka. Now we are beginning today chapter 4, Hamocher et Habayit, someone who sells his home. Lo machar yitzia, he sells the house but not the yitzia. Now yitzia is a shed or an annex. And the word Yitzia is used in Tanakh to describe the little rooms, these little cubby rooms that are built into the wall of the Beit HaMikdash. So they're not part of the main structure. They're not really the Kodesh or the Kodesh Kodashim, but they're right behind it, built into the wall. The Mishnah adds, even if these annex rooms, these sheds open into the home itself, they're considered a separate usage. They're for storage, they're for some other purpose. They're not really for residential purpose. The Batra here, he does distinguish if these things are small. They're itty-bitty rooms, they're less than 4 by 4 amot, then they are not considered hashuv. They're not important, and they're batal, they're secondary to the house, and they come along with the house. It's only when they're bigger than 4 amot square, then they're considered a separate hashuv, important entity by themselves, and they're not necessarily included in a sale of the house. Now, obviously, we're going to see later, if the seller says everything, then everything comes with. But if he just says my house, he's not including these little sheds, even if they're attached to the wall of the house. The Mishnah adds a similar thing, v'lo et cheder, not the storeroom, shelifnim mimeno, that's inside the house. So this is like something built into the back of the house. Even though you have to go to the house to get it, it's only for storage, not for residential purposes. It doesn't necessarily convey with a sale of the house. Lo et gag, and not the roof of the house, bizman sheyesh lo makeh gvoa asar tefachim, when it has a fence around it, which is 10 tefachim high. Now, this word makeh should remind us of Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 22. Asita makeh l'gagecha. We actually have a mitzvah, a commandment in the Torah to build a fence around a roof, because somebody might, God forbid, fall off the roof. So if the roof is a flat surface that can be used, there's actually a mitzvah to put up some fence. And so if it's such a surface that has an independent usage, it's something important, and it does not convey automatically with the house. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Rita adds, Im yesh lo tzurat petach, if there's a built doorway to get onto this roof, afal pisha eina gvua asar tefachim, even if it doesn't have a proper makeh, a proper fence, guardrail around the roof to protect people from falling, eino machor. That's still independent enough that it does not come with the house, even though maybe it's a slanted roof, it's not used so often. Maybe he just puts the laundry up there to dry, or puts the fruit up there to dry and make raisins. If it has a door frame, it's already chashuv enough to not automatically convey with the house. It has its own independent use. Mishnah Beit continues this theme, lo et bor, lo et dut. If he sold the house, he doesn't necessarily include the bor, the water pit that's next to or underneath the house, lo et dut, not the water cistern. The Batra explains the cistern is different from the bor because it's lined with stones to prevent leakage. Afal pisha katav lo umka beruma. And this is even when the seller wrote in the contract, in the deed to the buyer, I'm giving you umka, the depths, veruma, to the heights. Now that language would include things like the yitzia and the storage cheder, but it doesn't include the water cisterns that are under the house or next to the house, because these are considered independent, even if you wrote umka veruma. So after such a sale of the house, the seller still owns the bor vedut, he owns the water storage, and the buyer owns everything else. So as a result, the Mishnah adds, Sorich likach lo derech, Divrei Rabbi Akiva, that according to Rabbi Akiva, the seller has to either purchase or ask to be given the right to access his water storage, which is under this house that he just sold. And the Batra cites the Gemara as to why, de mocher ba'ayin yafe mocher, that according to Rabbi Akiva, when someone sells, they tend to throw in everything. They tend to be generous. Ayin yofe is they tend to be generous. So he sold the house, and he even sold the rights to access the water pit, even though the seller is maintaining ownership of that water pit. So now the seller has to purchase or acquire the rights to access, to go through that house to get to his water pit. But the other sages say, they say he does not have to ask for or purchase the right to access his water pit. If he's maintaining ownership of the water pit, he also has an implied easement to access his water pit, even if he sold the house and the annex and the sheds and everything else. Here they would hold mocher ba'ayin ra. Mocher. Now this ayin ra is not the part that, we're concerned about people looking at us and judging us and coming into harm through that. God forbid, lo aleinu. This is just being stingy also means ayin ra, because really it's a form of stinginess if you look at someone else and say, oh, why does he have such a beautiful car and a beautiful landscaping? And it's a form of not appreciating what you have. So here too, the Gemara uses ayin ra in the sense that someone's a little stingy. If he's maintaining ownership of something, he also maintains ownership of the access rights to get there. He's not giving it all away. Though in the Gemara they say the sages agree to Rabbi Akiva, someone who's giving the house as a gift would also be giving the access rights. Just when they sell it, they tend to retain more with ayin ra, with stinginess for themselves. The Mishnah adds, Mode Rabbi Akiva bizman she'amar lo chutz me'elu. Rabbi Akiva agrees if the seller tells the buyer, I'm giving you the house, chutz, except for the bor v'dut, except for the water storage. She'eino tzorech l'rachlo derech. He doesn't have to buy access rights. So according to Rabbi Akiva, the extra words in the contract are to reserve the right to access the water storage. Machorin la'acher, what if he sold them to someone else? So he's selling the pits, the water storage, and he's keeping the house. Rabbi Akiva omer einu tzarich l'chachlo derech. That the buyer of the water pit does not have to buy or ask for access, for an easement to get in there, because again, mocher ba'ayin yafa mocher, the seller is generous. The other sages say, no, he's just selling the water, he's not necessarily selling access rights. That's separate unless stated in the contract. Always good to check the contract and see what comes with the property. Yashar koach, tizku l'mitzvot.